In this video, I won't be going through just any simple chapter review, but I'll be attempting to throw in a few old theories of mine, like the meaning behind the Will of D, the extinct races, the ancient kingdom, the void century, Luffy's dream, and so much more. So without any further delay, let's get right into it. The chapter begins with how it ended, Kuma winding up a punch filled with the agony of his past, all of the torture he had faced as a slave of the celestial dragons across his lifetime. All talk of Saturn and his discrimination against Kuma's clan, the Buccaneers, is brought up once more. A belief of his is that Kuma's people are destined to be slaves, no right to have any free will of their own whatsoever. I've been wondering about the many possibilities why Saturn says this about Kuma's race, and the idea of it being fueled by just racism alone doesn't come to mind. Instead, his belief makes me think that the Buccaneer clan have a long history of being servants of the celestial dragons, and even slaves in the ancient past as well. Is it possible that this clan existed simply to be slaves from the beginning of their times? Or maybe they became slaves as a punishment for being disciples of sun god Nika, as I said in the video before. Even then, I can just combine the two ideas and say that the Buccaneers already existed as slaves with no will of their own, listening to every command up until sun god Nika saved them, which led to them becoming his disciple, only for them to be recaptured again later down the line by the enemy of Nika, which of course could be the Gorosei, since they are well aware of Nika and fear his return. Each of the said to be extinct clans, the Lunarians, the Buccaneers, the Oni race, were all hunted by the war government because they stood against them. It could be said that this all occurred as a result of the Void Century, whilst these clans supported Joy Boy in a great war that resulted in defeat of an ancient united kingdom filled with the many different clans. But I think that their eradication was done over a longer period of time, including the Void Century and even long after that. The Buccaneers clearly have strong ties to the legend of Nika, constantly spreading the great stories, and so their defeat may have come years before the Void Century, and only once the ancient god Nika was eliminated were they once more enslaved. Prior to the Great War, Joy Boy may have freed them. Only after the Great War during the Void Century, where Joy Boy had united the races together like the Fishermen and other clans that suffered at the hands of the world government just as they currently do, did the world government decide that the Buccaneers could no longer be controlled like they had assumed. As for the Lunarians, I believe that their extinction may have occurred at a similar time as well, with sun god Nika being a member of this race and this race allying with Joy Boy. Even King was the main reason for Kaido wanting to be Joy Boy, someone who was also from a race that was hunted, which is seen in Wano where he warned Yamato that the child of ogres should not befriend humans. The Oni race may have also been a part of an ancient kingdom filled with the different people, and all of this will be key in my theory as to what the Will of D means, which is simply being a united people of different races living together in harmony in the ancient kingdom, fighting together as one against their enemy, which of course would be the world government at that time. And as we all know, the D name isn't just carried by humans, but other races as well, just like the giants with the Jaguar as proof of that. A united world is a dream both Big Mom has attempted to achieve and one that Luffy wants to achieve as well. Big Mom's way feels inauthentic since most of the different races living in her island are simply children of hers that share the same blood. That unity is built on the reality that they are siblings and her own children. However, Big Mom still manages to mistreat them and mocks their appearances, even telling Pudding that her third eye was ugly and needed to keep it covered. Whereas Luffy goes from island to island, liberating all those that are suffering, like the humans at Alabasta, Fishermen at Fisherman Island, and so on. The bond feels more authentic and has a better chance at a united world being achieved. Hence the idea of a big festival with everyone in the end of the story, just like they do at the end of every arc when he frees each group suffering at the hands of the criminals oppressing them. Hopefully I can go into better depth that can expand on the points I've stated in another video, showing us how it will lead to Luffy uniting all the oppressed races to complete a revolution far greater than his father ever could in the Great War to come. Back to the chapter now, and Bonnie's cries echo as Kuma lunges at Saturn with his fists ready to connect. Saturn is confused as to why Kuma is still alive, considering he activated a self-destruct mechanism back when he was still with the revolutionaries. It must be really confusing from his perspective, a robot with no free will supposedly, and still managing to hunt him down with a clear expression of hatred still present in him, especially since Saturn took so many precautions to make sure Kuma could not be a threat whatsoever, even if he was still alive as well, and yet Kuma defies Saturn's commands. Kuma is able to connect the punch with Saturn, and previously I actually thought Oda would never let this happen, but I'm glad Kuma got to inflict some sort of pain on Saturn. For a man like Kuma, a pacifist that would never choose to harm people of his own free will, for the first time in the series used armament haki to inflict as much pain as possible on Saturn, capturing his resentment towards the man that caused him so much pain. The Buccaneer born to be a slave, breaking the chains and finally standing up to his slave master, a Gorosei, the very epitome of the suffering he and many other oppressed people have faced. The Marines, funnily enough, are simply tools for the world government that still hold the same prejudice against people like Kuma as simple slaves that should just bow down to their masters. They don't even seem to realize that the concept of having slaves is a clear injustice, or maybe they do but they're just willing to make exceptions for those with power. Not only do they take orders to shoot at a child crying and obeying the commands without refusing to accept them, they seem to not share a shred of sympathy as well, only caring for someone like Saturn whenever he gets hurt. This all shows us how corrupt the Marine faction has been, and why it will take a full-scale revolution led by the revolutionaries to overcome the corruption in the Marines and the ideology they carry that makes them hated enough to be killed by the very civilians they're meant to protect. Dragon and Vegapunk had already spoken about the state of the Marines a few decades back, and now it seems even worse than it was back then, with the man leading the Marines a mass murderer who had killed an entire ship of citizens, fearing a single O'Hara scholar would escape. A Vice Admiral making a decision like that without even being asked to do so shows us exactly what he is, no more than a mad dog that would oblige at every command of the Gorosei. Characters like Kobe and Smoker will lead the future change as well from the inside, whilst the mad dogs that take any order they're given by the corrupt government like Akainu will be defeated, and those like Kizaru will have to choose who they side with in the Great War to come. Something terrible might happen in the future that sparks a split between the Marines. Maybe Emu's secret being revealed forces the Marines to make a decision, to continue serving devils or to break free and finally serve the interests of the people. This, in my opinion, will cause the final Great War to come. After Saturn is hit by Kuma, the others are able to move once more. Sanji, Atlas and Frankie all sprint over to see if Bonnie's okay and to get her to safety on the upper levels to escape with the others. Bonnie's still crying, and for the first time Kuma, since he had separated from Bonnie, was able to pick her up and hold her in his arms. Despite being nothing more than a robot that fulfills commands, here he is not only protecting Bonnie, but still showing signs of emotions being present. Vegapunk admits that he didn't truly install a self-destruct mechanism, but something that would switch off Kuma for good. This would make it so that Kuma would no longer be around, and so Saturn would have to assume that he killed him successfully, or rendered useless. I had my doubts about Vegapunk, but I'm glad his conscience prevented him from obliging to such a command. However, this all still means that Kuma should not be moving at all, and should just be nothing more than a corpse with no will or orders causing it to move. And so we're left to make our own conclusions based on another secret Oda drops, refusing to dive any deeper about the Buccaneer clan. I've already stated that the reason the Buccaneers might be different to the other races is that they were disciples of the sun god Nika, but now it seems they possess another characteristic that would explain why Kuma is able to fulfill his goals of protecting Bonnie despite having no free will or orders programmed into him. And this may also be another reason as to why Saturn differentiates the Buccaneers from the other clans. Could it be that the Buccaneer clan were an actual race of slaves that simply could fulfill commands without the necessary requirements of having any free will? Maybe their very goals are in their lineage factor, and so as long as blood runs through their veins, that's all they need to have to complete what they've vowed to complete. Their very goals are instilled in their physical bodies, and that's the reason why I think Kuma is still able to take care of Bonnie, since it's been ingrained in his very body to do so. He doesn't need any free will or memories to complete what he set out to achieve. I think this is the reason why they continue to tell the same story of Nika, the person that had freed them from their internal suffering as slaves, and it's why the Buccaneers remain loyal to him since they're born. Their loyalty to him is ingrained in their very DNA. Just as devil fruits change the lineage factor in people, I think that objectives and emotions of Buccaneers can change their own lineage factor. In my last video I was certain that Kuma was dead, especially due to the reaction of Vegapunk, and that may still be the case in the spiritual sense. Physically though, that doesn't seem to be the case. If anything, this characteristic of the Buccaneer clan makes it so that the body can continue to function so long as the heart is pumping blood around the body. Then we see a panel of Kizaru saying it's over, clutching his head. I'm sure the inner turmoil he's been suffering right now is nothing compared to what he's been through. We've always seen him as that character that never has a second thought, doing whatever he pleases, with instances where he would offer to take on 2 Yonko at once. This time he's being forced to actually rethink about his choices and take a big step in his ideals, similarly to what Aokiji had to do when facing Garp, which is why I think Aokiji only beat Garp once he was certain about being a part of Blackbeard's crew being the right decision for himself, to complete whatever goal it was he wanted to achieve, which may include toppling the world government with Blackbeard's help. I personally think Aokiji is more of an extreme version of Garp. We know Garp still sees the Marines as a force for good, but he has times as well where he's struggling to stick by the Marine code. He wants to kill Akainu and needed Sengoku to hold him down after Ace's death, and is someone who's avoided becoming an admiral purely to not be under the direct control of the Gorosei. If it wasn't for his title of the hero of the Marines, Garp would have probably left by now, but since he holds that title, it's necessary he remains loyal to them since he's an icon to their people, and a major factor as to why the people can still trust the Marines. Aokiji, however, could not handle working for the Marines and had to leave, knowing that the rule under Akainu would take a turn for the worst and further separate the trust between the common people and the Marines. I'm working on a video about the path of the OG admirals, so let me stop getting carried away with this and stay on track. Back to Kizaru now, and we can see that it's his inner struggle that resulted in him fighting awkwardly against Luffy and forcing him to ask Saturn for a little more time. I'd like to think that was him looking for an excuse to think carefully about his next decisions and how he could play out an ending in his favour, one where the Straw Hats and the others could escape while still pleasing Saturn at the same time, which of course is impossible, unless of course a third party arrives to disrupt things as they stand, which I'll be coming back to. Again, I could be reading Kizaru's words and face completely wrong, and it's just him realizing that the others have taken it way too far and all hell would be let loose now, resulting in mass destruction and chaos, a fate none of his former friends can escape. One can see it as Kizaru lying to himself. He's aware of Saturn's strength and has to reassure himself with false hopes that maybe everything turns out fine and he can just call the mission off, saying it ended in defeat, allowing for the others to escape. Or like I said, he's realized that it's over for the others now and there's no chance of them escaping, nor any excuses for him either when Saturn gets up. He'll be forced to push past the emotional limits holding him back and fight for the Gorosei like he must. Right now the devil on his shoulder is forcing him to remain a cog in the machine. We also see that the Marines are panicking at the fact that Luffy escaped. Whoever gave him food is still at large and it's unknown who that person is, but I still feel like it was never Kizaru despite all the rumours everyone was spreading last chapter, saying it was Kizaru just playing both sides. I believe that maybe Caribou was helping Luffy. Think about it. Oda wouldn't just leave him out the story for no reason, especially since he made a conscious effort to keep him with the Straw Hats since the return to Sabaody. We saw him help Luffy at the prisons of Wano, helping him to escape to fight Kaido later on and was rewarded with a passage onto Luffy's ship. We then see Caribou hear about Pluton whilst on the ship and says someone will be glad to hear about it. So a question arises now. Who is this person Caribou is working for, and how badly have you underestimated Caribou? He seems to be well educated about the past and certain events, as well as the fact he's been a key instigator in steering Luffy unknowingly in certain directions, having been with him for so long. It's clear that he's acting as a spy for someone at this point, but we'll have to find out later on for ourselves. Maybe this person could be Blackbeard, but I highly doubt Caribou had any form of contact to Blackbeard without any knowledge of our own. Oda doesn't want anyone to have any tears left after this. Bonnie holding her father's face and telling him she saw everything he went through was heart-wrenching. Putting it into perspective now, and it's really a lot for a child to see, and yet she's the one looking out for him, telling him that she's witnessed all the sacrifices he made for her and all the suffering her mother had to endure. And for me, it irritated me when Alpha was ripping up those letters Kuma had spent so much time on, but it seems Kuma's message still managed to get away across to Bonnie, despite taking so long. And of course, Saturn had to stand up and ruin the reunion, unwilling to let Kuma get a win. His hand seemed to have been crushed by the buildings that toppled onto him, and he's quite bloodied. His attention is fixated on Vegapunk, furious that Vegapunk had defied his orders right from the beginning, and of course Vegapunk plays it off as a story of love instead of betrayal. Vegapunk is far different to the other mad scientists we've seen, and the one most of us were expecting him to be prior to Egghead. He's probably one of the most lovable characters in the series, and the explanations for why he had to turn Kuma into a cyborg with no free will makes us love him even more, especially now knowing that he refused to accept Saturn's last request, which would result in Vegapunk being put on a hit list eventually, since it was a matter of time since Saturn would attempt to destroy Kuma. Saturn then regenerates his arm, to which even Sanji is completely shocked by, despite being the son of a great scientist himself and a modified human. This clearly doesn't seem to be a scientific enhancement, or maybe it is. We've only known that awakened Zoans have a faster recovery time, but I'm not sure we've seen anything remotely like this, where they can just restore their damaged limbs within an instant. It's like when we see Luffy and Brook drinking milk to restore their missing or broken bones, but here Saturn is actually able to bring back his lost arm. The interesting thing about this is the sound effects. The sound as if time is being rewinded, similar to the sound effects you'd hear when replaying an old videotape. So it may just be a part of Saturn's Devil Fruit ability, where he can undo damage done to him by rewinding time itself. A direct counter to Bonnie's Devil Fruit that can age people up and down. This time manipulating ability could explain what happened to the others, who were frozen in place and couldn't move until Saturn was hit. Could it be that they entered the radius of Saturn's ability and so were frozen in time? Saturn then launches yet another attack at Kuma, who still hasn't moved yet after hugging Bonnie tightly, possibly a result of Kuma's body finally stopping after fulfilling its goal, which was to secure the safety of Bonnie, and that's what it's only able to do so as long as its body functions. And so Sanji steps up and directs the attack with a kick like he's volleying a football. His fighting style might just be my favourite in the series, especially for a fighter that doesn't use any weapons or hands in general. Then Frankie also steps up, remembering all the sacrifices Kuma had made simply to protect their ships and his very creation, and so wants to return that same favour by stepping up to Ogorose, which even surprises Kizaru, who's surprised at the fact that the Straw Hats are no longer that inexperienced crew he could just toss around, but can each stand their own against those at the top. Frankie, by the way, is extremely underrated in his feat so far. Time and time again, we see him not buckle against the elite tiers, attacking Big Mom and offering to take on King for Zoro's sake, and has twice now defied Saturn by stealing Luffy away from his finishing blow, and now he's hit him with his radical beam. Kizaru comes to the rescue of the devil that whispers in his ear and strikes Frankie with a similar attack as well, sending him far away. And again the same sound effect can be seen, and the hole Frankie had left is now closing in a spiral, undoing all the damage that Saturn had been afflicted by. I also forgot to mention, but the reason why I believe Saturn's ability is time related is simply because regeneration doesn't take into account the clothes he's wearing. Bonnie warns Vegapunk that Kuma can no longer move, most likely due to his body reaching its physical limits, and may have reached a vegetable state like Vegapunk spoke of. Atlas rushes across to carry Kuma, and I've never realized how big Atlas is as well in size, lifting Kuma above her head with ease. Funnily enough, it reminded me of the original Atlas who was tasked with holding the heavens as punishment, so this panel was a nice callback to the very person that inspired the name of the Vegapunk clone. Kizaru, although stating it's time he wrapped things up, I still can't bring myself to believe he's telling the truth. This can't be the path he chooses for himself. We've seen Aokiji finally choose a path of his own when he was struggling against Garp, until of course we see him with a fixed resolve and hence defeating Garp only after he had chosen a path for good. Kizaru in this instant tells Vegapunk he should have worn a darker shade of glasses, after Vegapunk had told him that he's a very sad man, wondering if there was a shred of humanity left in someone that could obey the world government's corrupt orders to the extent of killing those that he knew very well, even to continue working for a man that would be killing a child. Either way, I want to keep believing Kizaru will switch sides, but someone like him has a very weird thought process due to his unclear sense of justice. He can't be read like the other characters, and even now it's impossible to get a read on him, but it's clear he's struggling mentally. The only two options for him at the end of this arc is to stand against the world government or give up on any humanity he may have left and side with the government until they crumble, because if this scenario isn't enough to sway his heart in the favour of the side of the Straw Hats, nothing can. Personally, I still believe he will have a change of heart, but will have to be in this arc. If he ends up fighting for Saturn till the end, I really don't see a way out for the Straw Hats. As of now, Sanji will be left to fight Kizaru and Saturn alone, whilst Frankie and Luffy's conditions are unknown. Zoro is still being held off by Lucci, and the others are still focusing on escape. And for the third time in the series, we've seen the activation of a Buster Call. The third time as well for Robin, who had survived the previous two. Knowing my jinxing ability, she's gonna face a bad fate at the end of this one, which reminds me of the lurking Blackbeard threat about. Imagine if one of his crewmates just snatch her, and then it sparks a fight between Blackbeard and Luffy. Then the fight for Robin would be the key to reading the final poneglyph, and so the two teams would be forced to take each other on, and the crew that ends up winning would be able to have their captain achieve status as Pirate King. I know I'm reaching for the stars here, but at this point you get the gist. The third party on their way repping the Blackbeard flag could be very well changing the course of the events occurring at Egghead, and even Dragon could be making his way as well, to save his son from the threat that endangers him. There was an excuse for Dragon to not attend Wano, but now even Kuma was able to find his way there, and Dragon is aware of where Kuma was headed. There's no better time for the man marked by flames himself to show up than now, and take out Ogorose as a first big move by the revolutionaries, and turn the looming threat of the Blackbeard crew away from his son. Now of course we all understand what Saturn meant when he said, a traitor who studied the taboo secrets of the world, which of course is Vegapunk and his studies of the Void Century that was exposed, a survivor of a bloodline that should be extinct, which of course is Kuma. The Buccaneers, like the Lunarians, are clear enemies of the world government, and so they're the targets of elimination due to their past allegiances against big enemies of the world government, like those that supported Joy Boy and the Ancient Kingdom's fight that ended in their defeat. And finally, a pirate who had awakened the ancient god's power, a statement that will be a great addition to a working theory of mine in the truth behind Devil Fruits. It's clear that powerful entities that are quite unexplained exist in the One Piece world. It's why Devil Fruit exists in the first place. A high possibility that Devil Fruits are simply powered entities that were sealed into Devil Fruits. Like I said though, I'll get into a greater depth in another time. At the time of this late upload, the latest chapter 1105 has come out. The lurking threat of a third party shown to us at the end of the chapter can either save this situation or make it numerous times worse. Me personally, I think it was the Blackbeard crew members that were already on their way. Still, there is a possibility that it's the revolutionaries or even the Grand Fleet that have come to save the day. For now, that's all from me, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please make sure to subscribe for more chapter reviews in the future and some theories I've got in the works, like the truth behind Devil Fruits and the Ancient Kingdom. Thanks for watching, and peace.